Hi, folks. We recognize that our God is a mighty and awesome God. And since He controls the whole universe and everything in existence, He can do things that we cannot fully grasp from our human perspective. When He acts in ways that we cannot grasp, we call those miracles. Webster's defines a miracle as an extraordinary event manifesting divine intervention in human affairs. We are fascinated and are in awe of miracles, and rightly so. Miracles show us how God can turn around any situation in our lives in the blink of an eye. When things are often at their bleakest, there is always hope that God can work in a miraculous way to change it. If you look in your lives, you can probably see times where God has performed a miracle. Maybe you know someone else who had God perform a miracle in their lives as well. The Bible is full of miracles. The parting of the Red Sea, Jesus turning water into wine, the walls of Jericho that fell down, the multiplying of the widow's oil, Jesus healing the blind man, Jonah saved in the belly of a fish, Jesus rising from the tomb, from the grave, Daniel saved from a den of hungry lions, Lazarus raised from the dead, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego enduring the fiery furnace and coming out even without a singe or even the smell of fire. And the list goes on and on, miracle after miracle. You can see God working in miraculous ways time and time again, and He's still doing it today, folks. He reaches into the lives of people who are struggling with so many different issues and performs a miracle. Today's message is entitled, When God Works in a Miraculous Way. We're going to look at a passage today in Acts chapter 12, verses 1 through 17. In this passage, we see some main characters. And the first character that we see is King Herod, who is concerned about the spread of the early church and the gospel of Jesus Christ. Peter, who is eager to spread the gospel to anyone willing to hear it. And then we have the people of the church, the early church there. And finally, there is a servant girl named Rhoda. And maybe as we go through this passage, you can identify with one or maybe two or of these characters and maybe see yourself in them a little bit. But God intervenes in the situation in a miraculous way. So let's see what happened. Acts chapter 12, beginning in verse 1. It was about this time that King Herod arrested some who had belonged to the church, intending to persecute them. He had James, the brother of John, put to death with the sword. And when he saw that this met with the approval amongst the Jews, he proceeded to seize Peter also. This happened during the feast of unleavened bread. After arresting him, he put him into prison, handing him over to be guarded by 4 squads of 4 soldiers each. Herod intended to bring him out for a public trial after the Passover. So King Agrippa the first was the king. He was appointed to govern Judea, a Roman province. His primary job was to keep the peace in Judah. One way he could do that was to keep the people of Judah happy. As the early church and Christianity began to spread, it started to threaten the peace that was there, the peace that he was responsible to keep. For King Herod, the church and those who were spreading the gospel were a problem that needed to be dealt with very quickly, a problem that needed to be eliminated. And so he had James put to death. And when he saw that this excited a lot of the Jews, he knew he was on to something, so he went after Peter. He had him arrested and he threw him into prison. He would face trial the next morning. At least that was Herod's plan. A friend of mine once told me, "You know how to make God laugh? Tell him your plans." Always think about that. We all have a vision of how we see things unfolding based on what we know with our limited human knowledge. King Herod was no exception. He thought he had the situation under control, his control. But he was about to see that God had another plan. Back to verse 5. So Peter was kept in prison, but the church was earnestly praying to God for him. The night before Herod was to bring him to trial, Peter was sleeping between 2 soldiers bound with 2 chains. The sentry stood guard at the entrance. And Peter was in prison awaiting his trial. This Peter was the same Simon who, along with his brother Andrew and brothers James and John, had fished all night years before and caught nothing. And they were washing their nets. And then Jesus came along and he climbed into Simon's boat and started preaching. Imagine that. Somebody just comes in and sits down in your boat and starts preaching. When Jesus had finished preaching, he told these fishermen to give it one more try with their nets. And so this same Simon at the time replied, "Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything. But because you say so, I will let down the nets." The same man that had seen Jesus miraculously fill their nets with so many fish that their nets began to tear. The same Simon who, along with his brother Andrew and James and John, was called by Jesus to be his disciples. A man who walked on water with Jesus, which is another miracle in itself. The man who denied Jesus, who had been arrested and was on his way to the cross. Probably not a moment that he was proud of. But he was also the man who was forgiven by Jesus for his denial. Peter, who had listened to and acted upon Jesus' words recorded in Mark 16:15, where Jesus says, "Go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation." This enthusiastic follower of Jesus who had been obedient to his instructions, was now in prison, awaiting his trial that could end rather badly based on what had happened to John earlier. Peter was chained to two guards and guarded by sentries in the prison that night. He really didn't know what to expect next, but he did know that God was still in control. Back to verse 7. Suddenly an angel of the Lord appeared, and a light shone in the cell. Peter had known that God was with him, but now God had sent an angel, a real angel, God's messenger, a heavenly night light into the darkness of Peter's cell. Another unexpected miracle from God. Peter was still sleeping at the time, and so what happened next was going to be a little hard for him to process at first. Was he dreaming, or was this really happening? He was about to experience a real deer in the headlights moment sent straight from God himself. Back to verse 7. And he struck Peter on the side and woke him up. "Quick, get up," he said. And the chains fell off Peter's wrist. Those heavy chains that had bound him to the two guards were now gone. Imagine the sudden relief from the lightened load that had been placed upon him as a result of the orders of King Herod. God had intervened in a miraculous way. Yet again, he had to think about this, and was this really happening? Peter was still waking up, and so he was probably a little fuzzy-headed from the sleep. And the angel took charge of the situation. Verse 8. Then the angel said to him, "Put on your clothes and your sandals." So Peter did so. "Wrap your cloak around you and follow me." Oh, there's those words again. He probably thought about Jesus saying, "Come, follow me." "Wrap the cloak around you and follow me," the angel told him. Peter followed him out of the prison, but he had no idea that what the angel was doing was really happening. He thought he was seeing a vision. Still half asleep, Peter knew that he needed to follow God's instructions that were being shared with him by this angel. True faith does not hesitate or ask a lot of questions. True faith reacts with obedience. Whatever you say, God, I'm all in. Tell me what you want me to do, and I'll do it. 2 Corinthians 5:7 says, "For we live by faith, not by sight." Bleary-eyed Peter, waking up, was walking by faith. Do you do that? Do you walk by faith daily? When God tells you to do something, do you obey without hesitation? Or do you try and delay by asking some questions like, "Are you sure? Have you thought this out, God?" That's a really silly question, isn't it, when you think about it? But a lot of folks do those kind of things. Or do you just ignore him? When you fail to respond in the way you should, you could be missing out on a miracle. Do not hesitate. Be like Peter. Walk by faith. Back to verse 10. They passed the first and the second guards and came to the iron gate leading to the city. And it opened for them by itself. That's right, by itself. And they went through it. When they had walked the length of one street, suddenly the angel left him. And then Peter came to himself and said, "Now I know without a doubt that the Lord has sent his angel and rescued me from Herod's clutches and from everything the Jewish people were hoping that would happen." Peter was finally starting to grasp the magnitude of the miracle that had just happened to him. He keenly realized that while Herod thought he had custody and control of him, God had been in control the entire time. Herod's plan had been interrupted and changed by God's plan. Peter had gone to bed a prisoner and had awoken as a man freed from bondage by God. He had just lived out an illustration of salvation. Romans 6:6 says, "For we know that our old self was crucified with him so that the body ruled by sin might be done away with, that we should no longer be slaves to sin." John 8:36 says, "So if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed." Peter voiced his faith. "Now I know without a doubt that the Lord has sent his angel and rescued me from Herod's clutches." Peter embraced and believed the miracle that had been delivered by God that night. When God acts in a miraculous way in your life, do you accept it? Do you believe it? Do you cherish it and thank him? Do you receive it with unwavering faith? Peter did. Peter had lived it time and time again. The same Peter that had walked on the water with Jesus. Back to verse 12. "And when this dawned on him, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, who was also called Mark, where many people had gathered and were praying. And Peter knocked at the outer entrance, and a servant named Rhoda came to answer the door. When she recognized Peter's voice, she was so overjoyed, she ran back without opening it and exclaimed, 'Peter is at the door.'" We now see young Rhoda in this story. This is the only time she is mentioned in the scriptures. As a servant, one of Rhoda's main duties was to answer the door. With King Herod's concentrated efforts against the early Christians in full swing, she would have been on high alert for any dangerous visitors. So that was an important job. But as a servant, she would have also been privy to the discussions about the arrest of Peter and his looming fate at the hands of Herod. She would have heard the prayers that had been offered in the house for Peter and may have been even praying for him as well. Of all the reactions in this passage, I think hers is the most authentic for a girl her age, and she was probably a teenager at the time. And when Peter knocks, she goes to the door and she hears his voice, and he'd probably been at the house numerous times, and she instantly recognized Peter's voice. She was so excited that he was there that she kind of lost it a little bit. The passage said she was so overjoyed she ran back without opening the door and exclaimed, "Peter's at the door." I think we need to have that kind of excitement when God works in miraculous ways in our lives. We should be overjoyed. We should not take it for granted or be unappreciative. We should be excited and thankful. She was so excited she left Peter outside. Peter is at the door. The same Peter who was arrested and the one that you've been praying for. He's here at the door. He's at the door. Peter, Peter, the man you've been praying for, here at the door. I love it. She was so excited, and she should be. God performed a miracle in their lives, and she was glad and happy and excited. We should have the same excitement in our lives as well when God responds to our needs and our prayers. He's here. God is at my door, in my life, and has worked in a miraculous way. Hallelujah. Praise the Lord. Be excited. Be happy. Be thankful. Unfortunately, the other people in the house did not respond in the same way. Back to verse 15. "You're out of your mind," they told her. When she kept insisting that this was so, they said it must be his angel. But Peter kept on knocking, and when they opened the door and saw him, they were astonished. Peter motioned with his hands for them to be quiet and described how God had brought him out of prison. "Tell James and the other brothers and sisters about this," he said, and then he left for another place. The group of believers that had gathered in the house quickly dismissed Rhoda's happy announcement. Despite praying for Peter, they had a little trouble believing that God had actually answered their prayers. Imagine that. They had prayed all that time, and they were taken back because the prayers had been answered. In fact, they went a step further in their unbelief by saying that if somebody was at the door, it was probably Peter's ghost, or Peter is an angel now. In other words, God had not listened to their prayers, and Peter was now dead. How many times have you half-heartedly prayed to God, not fully expecting him to respond? You just went through the motions. Perhaps you were thinking, well, I guess it wouldn't hurt to pray, I guess. That's not the kind of prayers that God really wants. Oh, he will still hear us. He's still our Father, and he listens to what we have to say, but he also looks for faith. And Jesus constantly warned those around him, saying, "You of little faith." We should pray with fervor and faith. Matthew 21:21, Jesus replied, "Truly I tell you, if you have faith and do not doubt, you can do what was done to the fig tree." And remember the fig tree, he looked at it and it died because it wasn't bearing any fruit. But you can also say to the mountain, "Go throw yourself into the sea," and it will be done. A whole mountain into the sea. James 1:6 says, "When you ask, you must believe and not doubt." because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. When they finally saw Peter, they were astonished, and they finally believed. Their reaction may have reminded Peter of another moment a little earlier in his life. John chapter 20, after Jesus had risen from the dead. And now Thomas, known as Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. And so the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." And he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here, see my hands. Reach your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." And Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." But Jesus told him, "Because you have seen, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." All this probably went through Peter's mind as he saw those folks that had been praying for him. And now he was standing in front of them, a freed man. Pray and have faith. And so, don't think that you control everything like King Herod thought he did. Understand that God is the one who's in control. Realize that true freedom comes through faith in Jesus Christ. When God speaks and works a miracle in your life, listen to him and step out in faith, just like Peter did. Be all in. You may not understand everything that is going on, but submit to God's will and don't look back. Be overjoyed and thankful when you encounter and experience God's work. Be overjoyed like Rhoda was in this passage. We could use some more of that. And don't forget to be in prayer, just like the early believers did. And when you pray, have faith and do not doubt. Perhaps you're going through something in your life right now that's kind of overwhelming you. Know that God can change it in the blink of an eye in a miraculous way, and have faith, folks. And when God does work those moments in your lives, accept them, go along with them, have faith, cherish them, get excited, share them. And when he asks you to do something, do it, folks. And don't miss out on those miracles. I love you all. I miss you all. May God bless you each and every day with miracles.